You know, it's funny the things you remember. I can't tell you what I had for breakfast yesterday, but I can tell you exactly what the air smelled like on the night I decided to buy the music box. It was late August, 2019. The air in our small rented house in central Pennsylvania had that specific heavy quality it gets before a thunderstorm, thick with the smell of wet asphalt and cut grass from a neighbor's lawn. I was sitting at our small kitchen table, the one with a wobbly leg I kept meaning to fix. My daughter, Sarah, was asleep upstairs. She was about to turn 7, and I was in that special kind of parental panic that comes with finding the perfect birthday gift. I was a single dad. Her mom had passed away from a sudden illness a few years prior. And ever since, it felt like I was playing a game where I didn't know the rules. Birthdays were the hardest. Her mom, Jessica, had been magical with things like that. She'd have known exactly what to get. Me? I was scrolling through eBay on my laptop, a lukewarm cup of coffee by my side, feeling like a complete failure. Sarah was a gentle soul. She wasn't into the loud, plastic toys that screamed and flashed. She loved stories, history, things that felt like they had a secret. That's why, when I saw the listing, it felt like a sign. The title was simple: Antique Wooden Music Box, Estate Find. The pictures were a little blurry, taken in what looked like a dimly lit room. The box was dark wood, maybe mahogany, with intricate carvings of vines and little birds on the lid. It wasn't ornate in a gaudy way, it was elegant. Quiet. The description was sparse. Plays a nice tune. Ballerina inside. From an old estate sale in New England. Sold as is. Something about it just felt right. It felt special, like something Jessica would have picked. In one of the photos, zoomed in on the inside of the lid, I could just make out a faded, cursive inscription. It was hard to read, but it looked like, "For my dearest Lily." I imagined a little girl, 100 years ago, cherishing this box. I thought Sarah would love that. She would love the history of it. So, I clicked, buy it now. I didn't even think twice. It was a little more than I wanted to spend, but the image of Sarah's face when she opened it was worth every penny. I closed the laptop, finally feeling like I'd gotten something right. Outside, the first drops of rain began to patter against the windowpane. I went to bed that night feeling a sense of accomplishment. That's the baseline of normalcy I mentioned. It's the last time I remember feeling truly, uncomplicatedly at peace in that house. The box arrived a week later, on the day before her birthday. The packaging was strange. It was a plain brown cardboard box, excessively wrapped in packing tape. No return address, just a smeared shipping label from a fulfillment center in Delaware. It felt impersonal, anonymous. When I finally cut it open, the music box was nestled inside a bed of yellowed, musty-smelling newspaper. It was even more beautiful in person. The wood was cool and smooth under my fingers. When I wound the small key on the bottom and opened the lid, a tiny, delicate ballerina with a painted-on smile slowly turned to a tune I didn't recognize. It was a simple melody, but it had a strange, melancholic quality. It was in a minor key, and a few of the notes sounded just slightly off, like a memory you can't quite place. It wasn't "Happy Birthday." It was something sadder, more haunting. Still, I knew Sarah would love it. I wrapped it in bright unicorn paper and hid it in my closet. The next morning, she was ecstatic. She tore off the paper, her eyes wide. "A treasure box," she squealed. She opened it, and her face fell into a state of pure wonder as the ballerina twirled and the sad little tune filled the room. She listened to it play through 3 times in a row, completely mesmerized. "I love her, Daddy," she whispered, tracing the ballerina with her finger. "What's her name?" "I don't know, sweetie. You can name her whatever you want." She looked at the box, then back at me. "Her name is Lily," she said, matter-of-factly. My heart did a little stutter step. I hadn't mentioned the inscription. I hadn't even been sure I'd read it correctly. "Why do you say that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. She pointed a small finger at the faded script inside the lid. "It says so. For my dearest Lily," she told me. I leaned in. Sure enough, there it was, clearer in the morning light. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. "Oh, right, I forgot about that. You've got good eyes, kiddo." She just smiled, a secret little smile, and went back to watching the ballerina. Lily likes the music, she said, and that was the first red flag. It was so small, so easily explained. A child with a great imagination sees a name and incorporates it into her play. It was cute. It was normal. I told myself it was normal. For the first week, everything was. Sarah carried that music box everywhere. It sat on her nightstand while she slept. The sad, tinny melody became the new soundtrack to our lives. And she started talking to Lily constantly. It was typical imaginary friend stuff. At first, Lily wants to have tea with us. Lily doesn't like carrots. Lily thinks your shirt is a funny color. I played along. It felt healthy. A way for her to process her loneliness. We were a quiet house. Just the two of us. Of course she'd invent a friend. The first time I felt a genuine spike of unease was about 2 weeks after her birthday. It was a Tuesday. I remember because I had just finished paying bills online. It was almost 2 a.m. The house was dead silent. The kind of silence that has a weight to it. I was walking down the upstairs hallway to my bedroom when I heard it. From behind Sarah's closed door. Plink, plonk, plink. It was the music box. Just a few hesitant notes. Then silence. My blood went cold. I stood there in the dark hallway. Every muscle tensed. I told myself it was nothing. The house was old. The floorboards creak. Maybe the mechanism in the box was old and had just slipped a gear. That had to be it. I crept to her door and pushed it open a crack. The moonlight streamed through her window, casting long shadows on the floor. Sarah was fast asleep in her bed, her breathing deep and even. And there, on her nightstand, the music box sat, lid closed, silent. I must have imagined it. I was tired, stressed from work. That's what I told myself. I closed her door and went to bed. But it took me a long time to fall asleep. Every creak of the house sounded like that tinny, off-key melody. This is how it begins. Not with a scream, but with a whisper, with a doubt planted in your mind that you desperately try to uproot with logic. The incidents started to get closer together. They were all small things. Things you could explain away if you tried hard enough. I'd come home from work and find Sarah's bedroom door, which I had left open, firmly shut. I'd ask her, and she'd say, "Lily is shy. She wanted some quiet time." One afternoon, I was in the kitchen making spaghetti, and Sarah was in the living room, supposedly watching cartoons. But it was quiet, too quiet. I peeked around the corner. She was sitting on the floor in front of the coffee table, with all her crayons and paper spread out. The TV was off. She was whispering, then pausing, as if listening to a reply, then nodding. It wasn't the happy, bubbly chatter of a child playing. Her expression was serious, intent. It was unsettling. "Who are you talking to, sweetie?" I asked, forcing a smile. She looked up at me, her eyes a little distant. "Lily," she said simply. "She's telling me about her old house." It was cold there. A chill that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room crawled up my spine. "Oh yeah? What else did she say?" "She said her daddy got angry a lot. She said she had to be very, very quiet." I didn't know what to say to that. It was getting a little too specific. A little too dark for a 7-year-old's fantasy. I chalked it up to something she must have overheard on TV. Kids are sponges, right? They absorb everything. But then came the drawings. Sarah had always loved to draw. Our refrigerator was a chaotic collage of smiling suns, stick figure portraits of me and her holding hands, and our lopsided house with a plume of smoke coming out of the chimney. But her new drawings were different. They were all of her and Lily. At first, Lily was just another stick figure, smiling next to her. But then the drawings started to change. Lily was always drawn in gray or black crayon. She never had a mouth. And soon, she stopped having eyes. In their place were just empty, dark circles, ovals of blackness on the page. In every picture, Lily was standing a little too close to the stick figure Sarah. Sometimes her hand would be on Sarah's shoulder. In one particularly disturbing drawing, the Sarah figure was smiling, but the Lily figure, with her blank eyes, was standing behind her, her long, spindly arms wrapped around Sarah's neck. It wasn't a hug. It looked like she was choking her. When I asked Sarah about it, she just shrugged. "That's what she looks like," she'd say, without emotion. The rational part of my brain was screaming for an explanation. She's processing her mom's death. She's feeling lonely. This is a cry for attention. I even made an appointment with a child psychologist. But it was weeks away. In the meantime, the atmosphere in our house grew heavier, more oppressive, day by day. The breaking point for my skepticism, the moment I knew this wasn't in my head, happened on a Saturday morning. I woke up early, around 6 a.m. I went downstairs to make coffee, and as I walked into the living room, I stopped dead. There, in the exact center of the room, sitting on the rug, was the tiny ballerina from the music box. My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew, with absolute certainty, that it had been inside the box on Sarah's nightstand when I checked on her before bed. The lid was always closed. You had to physically open the lid and lift the ballerina off her magnetic peg. There was no way it could have just fallen out. I went upstairs. Sarah was still sound asleep. The music box was on her nightstand. I lifted the lid. The peg where the ballerina should have been was empty. I went back downstairs, my mind racing. I picked up the tiny porcelain figure. It was cold to the touch. Unnaturally cold. I walked into the kitchen and made myself put it on the counter. I stood there, breathing hard, trying to force my brain to work. Maybe Sarah had woken up in the night, taken it out, and brought it downstairs. Maybe she was sleepwalking. It was possible. It had to be possible. When she came down for breakfast, I asked her about it, trying to sound casual. "Hey sweetie, did you bring your little ballerina downstairs last night?" She was pouring milk into her cereal, a look of intense concentration on her face. Without looking up, she said, "No, Lily wanted to dance where there was more room." Her old room was very small. I stared at the back of her head. The spoon in my hand was shaking. It was the delivery. It was so matter-of-fact, so calm. It wasn't the voice of a child playing make-believe. It was the voice of someone reporting a fact. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the couch in the dark, just listening. The house groaned and settled around me, but every sound was magnified, sinister. Around 3 a.m., I decided I needed to know more about the box. I grabbed my laptop, my hands trembling slightly as I typed, "haunted items sold on eBay." I fell down a rabbit hole. Stories about dolls whose eyes followed you, paintings of children that seemed to age, and yes, music boxes that played on their own. People telling stories just like mine. I'd always thought they were just that, stories. Campfire tales for the digital age. But now, reading them in my own silent, dark house, they felt terrifyingly real. I went back to the original eBay listing. The seller's account, estate finds 77, was gone. The page just said, "This user is no longer registered on eBay." There was no history, no other items for sale. It was a digital ghost. A dead end. Defeated, I decided to do one last search. It was a long shot. A complete stab in the dark. I searched for Lily, music box, and the name of the New England state I vaguely remembered from the estate sale description. Page after page of nothing. Then, buried on the fourth page of results, I found a link to a digitized newspaper archive from a small town local paper. The headline, dated 1958, read, "Local family tragedy. Father and daughter found." My blood turned to ice. I clicked the link. The story was brief, written in the detached prose of the era. A man named Thomas Miller and his 8-year-old daughter, Lillian, were found dead in their home from what police suspected to be carbon monoxide poisoning from a faulty furnace. The article mentioned the mother had died of tuberculosis the winter before. It described Lillian as a quiet, solitary child. The last sentence of the article is seared into my memory forever. It was a quote from a neighbor. "It's such a tragedy. That poor girl. All she had in the world was that little music box her mother gave her." Lillian Miller, age 8, died in a cold house with her father. I slammed the laptop shut. The sound echoed in the silent house like a gunshot. It was real. This wasn't my imagination. This wasn't Sarah processing grief. There was a ghost in my house. A little girl named Lily was talking to my daughter. And then I heard a floorboard creak upstairs. My entire body went rigid. It wasn't the random groan of an old house. It was a footstep. Slow, deliberate. I wasn't just scared anymore. I was terrified. This was a primal fear. The kind that bypasses your brain and sinks straight into your bones. The feeling of being prey. I forced myself to move, my legs feeling like lead. I crept to the bottom of the stairs and looked up into the darkness of the second-floor landing. Nothing, just shadows. "Sarah?" I whispered. My voice was hoarse. Silence. I took the stairs one at a time, my hand gripping the banister so hard my knuckles were white. The air grew colder with each step. By the time I reached the top, I could almost see my breath. The cold was concentrated outside Sarah's room. Her door was ajar. A thin sliver of light from the hallway cut into the darkness. I pushed it open. Sarah was standing in the middle of her room. Her back was to me. She was perfectly still, staring at the wall. "Sarah, honey, what are you doing up?" She didn't turn around. She just stood there. The cold in the room was intense. Biting. It felt like walking into a freezer. "Sweetheart, talk to me. You're scaring Daddy." Slowly, she lifted her arm and pointed at the wall in front of her. "She's sad," Sarah said. Her voice was flat, hollow. It didn't sound like her. "She wants her mommy." I looked at the wall she was pointing at. It was just a blank, white wall. But as I stared, I felt it. A presence. A dense, heavy pocket of sorrow and rage that seemed to emanate from the very plaster. "Okay, honey," I said, my voice trembling. "Let's get you back in bed." I took a step towards her. And as I did, the music box on her nightstand flew open. The sad, tinny melody started playing, startlingly loud in the silent room. Sarah whipped her head around to look at me. And it wasn't her face. It was my daughter's face. But her eyes were wrong. They were wide, vacant, and filled with a darkness that wasn't a reflection of the room. It was a deep, ancient coldness, a look of pure malice. A triumphant sneer twisted her lips. "You can't have her," a voice whispered. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It was a child's voice, but reedy and thin, like the wind through a cracked windowpane. "She's my friend now. We're going to be sisters. Forever." For a second, I was paralyzed, frozen in pure, undiluted terror. The face of my daughter, but inhabited by something else. Something old and hateful. That was the moment. The moment the last vestiges of the normal world burned away, leaving only the nightmare. My paralysis broke. A wave of adrenaline, hotter and fiercer than any fear, surged through me. It was the protective instinct of a parent. I lunged forward and scooped Sarah into my arms. She felt strangely light, like a doll. As I turned to run, her body went rigid, and she started to struggle, thrashing with a strength a 7-year-old shouldn't have. "Let me go," she shrieked. But the voice was still that reedy, thin whisper. "Lily wants to play. We're playing a game." I didn't stop. I ran. I flew down the stairs, clutching her to my chest. The music box melody seemed to follow us, growing louder, more distorted, notes bending and screeching in a discordant symphony of madness. As I fumbled with the lock on the front door, I heard a sound from the top of the stairs that I will hear in my nightmares until the day I die. It was the soft, wet sound of bare feet slapping against the wooden floor. Slap, slap, slap. Getting closer. I wrenched the door open and ran out into the night, not even bothering to close it behind me. I didn't have my keys, my wallet, my phone, just my daughter in my arms and the clothes on my back. I ran to the car, threw her in the passenger seat, and thankfully, my keys were in the ignition from my trip to the store earlier. The engine roared to life. As I peeled out of the driveway, my headlights cut across the front of the house. For a split second, in the upstairs window of Sarah's room, I saw her, a small, pale girl in a faded nightgown. Her hair was dark and stringy. Her face was a white blur. And her eyes were just two dark, empty sockets. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at Sarah. I drove. I didn't know where I was going. Sarah was sobbing in the seat next to me now. Her own voice returning. "Daddy, I'm scared. Who was that girl? I had a bad dream." I just kept driving, putting as much distance as I could between us and that house. I drove for 3 hours straight, finally pulling into an all-night diner in the next state. We sat in a booth under the harsh fluorescent lights, and I held her as she cried herself to sleep. I never went back to the house. Not once. I called my sister the next day from a payphone. She lived 5 states away. Without asking too many questions, God bless her, she told me to come. I hired a moving company over the phone and told them to pack up my entire life. I gave them specific instructions. Take everything from Sarah's room, put it in boxes, and take it directly to the local landfill. And the music box, I told the guy, I want you to smash it with a hammer before you throw it away. I don't know if he did. I paid him extra. I hope to God he did. We started over. New town, new school, new life. Sarah doesn't remember any of it. Not Lily, not the drawings, not the thing in her room. Her therapist, a kind woman who thinks the world of my vivid imagination, calls it dissociative amnesia, a way for a child's mind to protect itself from trauma. Maybe she's right, but I think the memories aren't gone. I just don't think they ever belonged to my daughter in the first place. It's been 6 years. Sarah is 13 now, a happy, well-adjusted teenager. Our life is normal. It's boring, and I am grateful for every single boring second of it. But the story doesn't end there. The horror never really ends. It just fades into the background. A permanent stain on your life. I have nightmares. I'll wake up in a cold sweat. The faint, tinny sound of that goddamn music box playing in my head. Sometimes, when I'm in a crowd, I'll see a little girl with dark hair staring at me, and my heart will seize up. But then she'll turn and she's just a normal kid. But there's one last thing. The reason I'm telling this story. The reason I still check the locks 3 times before I go to bed. About a month ago, Sarah brought a new friend home from school. A nice girl named Chloe. They were upstairs in her room, working on a project. I was downstairs, making dinner, and I heard them laughing. It was a wonderful sound. But then, the laughter stopped, and I heard Chloe's voice, clear as day, flowed down the stairs. It's nice, she said, but isn't it kind of small in here? Don't you ever wish you had more room to dance?